Hi everybody and welcome back to Attack of the Grey Pile. Today I'm going to be starting a two-part video series on how to paint this Black Templar Lieutenant. My painting is going to be more erratic this time as I'm trying to maximize the amount of paint I can get on this mini in such a short amount of time. So please bear with me and let's go ahead and dive right in. So as you can see, I've already primed the model in black. I'm now disassembling the model to ensure that I can get the paint onto the surfaces that I want without having to worry about accidentally painting surfaces that I don't want the paint on. I'm first going to start by painting the handle on the sword so that then the thinned down red paint can slowly build up a layer over time. This will allow me to add more realism to the handle and the model later on when it comes time for the aging and shading on the model. Now I'm applying Ivory by Vallejo. I want to try and make the tabard look like linen, so I'm applying this very lightly with a very thinned down coat so that I can apply this layer and build it up over time. This will help keep the chalky nature of white paint down to a minimum, but it will look splotchy for the first couple of applications. It's okay if we touch other parts of the model at this point. This is still very early in the painting process. We can always go back and cover it up. Also, please remember to paint the backside of your model, especially if it's visible. I have seen it before where people will just paint the front side or the outermost portions of the model and say, yeah, it's good to go, and they leave so much detail unpainted. I highly recommend just taking the time and being thorough with your paint. It's all about enjoying the hobby. Now I'm painting the holster for the Neovolkite pistol. I'm putting a very dark brown down first, as later on in the series I will be applying a brighter shade of brown for edge highlighting and to replicate the wear and tear on leather as it bends. I will also be painting the interior of the holster red, as I want to give the appearance of a satin or felt-lined holster, to make it look a little bit more fancy and as though he's of higher ranking status. Now to paint the white stripe on the helmet. I'm using Vallejo's Cold White to get a very crisp and bright white on this helmet. However, I have used a watered down application so that then I can build this up over time. This white stripe on the helmet is used to distinguish him against the rest of my formation, as he is a senior space marine and I intend to use him in a leadership role. Now to start the first bout of edge highlighting. Here you can see I'm starting to apply it to the chest armor, specifically at the top because that's where the light will be coming down the brightest. I will also apply it along all edges of the armor that I can paint so that then it shows a chipped finish on the model and gives that appearance of wear and tear. It will be a little bright at this point in time as we have not yet hit it with a global wash, which will help knock it down and tie it into the overall image of the model. As you can see, I've taken a pause on applying my edge highlighting. I've noticed that some of the white paint has spilled over onto the chest armor as well as the belt and some of the hip armor. I will be going back over this in black paint so as to give me a uniform base coat, which will help create a uniformed top color coat later. I don't want to have a boatload of splotches on the belt or on the armor that shouldn't really be there. Now I'm going to start cleaning up some of the paint that I've already applied by reapplying some ivory and then touching up on certain spots that were black, then returning back to my edge highlighting. It's important to remember to keep the edge highlight as sharp as possible close to the edge. We want to try and give the appearance of decades or even centuries of wear on this armor. The lore states this armor could be several thousand years old. This armor gets passed down from soldier to soldier and is treated very much as a relic of days gone by. Now I'm removing the sword as it's in the way, and I'd like to paint some of the back armor as well as on the back of the legs. The sword is blocking my access, and I don't want to run the risk of painting it in a color that I don't want it, as well as being limited in my ability to reach other spots of the model from this angle. It's best for me to remove it so that then I don't bump into it. On the toe box of the boot, you can see that I'm applying this paint rather broad. I'm trying to simulate the effect of decades or centuries worth of scuffing on the front of the boot. This will later be knocked down to look far more realistic when we get into the shading and blending portion of this model. Here I'm painting the hanging strap or suspension strap of the scabbard. This is to keep the point of the scabbard from dragging along the floor, causing damage to the scabbard. I am also beginning to apply the brown paint to the accessories and the belt, since I am back here on the back of the model and have easy access to it. Coming around to the front of the model, I am now painting the front portion of the belt. I'm slowly adding to it and then going back over the scabbard to build up that opacity that I want in the rich tone. For my Black Templars, I tend to go very heavy on the edge highlighting. The black paint really lends itself well to showing wear and tear by applying gray paint along these panel lines and edges of the plates. It's quite intensive on some of these models, and really it's up to the artists themselves to decide when they want to stop or feel that they have enough edge highlighting on the model. It's really up to you as the artist. Here I'm starting to pick out some of the edges of the white stripe on the helmet. I want to try and add an edge of gray so that then it shows wear and age. Now for the eye lenses. Usually for leadership roles, I like to use a bright metallic blue for senior leadership, and then use gold for junior Space Marines or junior leaders. Here I've decided to go with a gold to show that he is part of a lower level organization within the chapter. Painting the oculi, I'm using metal color airbrush colors by Vallejo, specifically their steel color. I'm using my brush instead of an airbrush, considering that this spot on the model is very small and very high detailed. It doesn't really lend itself well for an ideal airbrush application. I am ensuring that every time I go back to reload the brush with paint, that I stir it so that then the metal component is still suspended within the suspension fluid. Returning to the sword handle, I am applying a thinned coat of red. This will help bring that opacity back. Now later on I will be knocking it back down using a global wash, which will bring it back down to a ruddy brown with red highlights. I am also painting the pommel at this point, applying a very light coat of gold, as I want to build that up as well over time to make it more level and realistic. Now to paint the purity seals. First I'm going to start by painting these scrolls with that ivory color mixed with a touch of cold white, as I really want to sell that these are newly applied scrolls. I will let those sit for a while to dry as I start painting the purity seals on his right shin. For the buckle, I've decided to mix a touch of that bright gold with a bit of the steel that I used on the ocula earlier. This is to try and give the belt buckle a bit of a brassy kind of finish to it, as I don't want it to look so fresh in steel or so fresh in gold. I want it to look aged and worn. With that same blend of gold and steel, I'm going to apply it to the skull. This will help draw some of that color tone from the belt buckle and really start to draw that out and make it stand out on its own amongst its surroundings. For the relics on his belt, I have added even more gold to that gold and steel mix, as I want to give them a polished appearance over centuries of being safeguarded by the Templars. I'm using gold to highlight the buttons on the pouches. You will see that I accidentally spill over the button itself and get too much gold on the pouch. That's totally fine. I can go back and use a watered down coat of brown and build up layers over time in a form called glazing, so that then I can fill that leather back to a full brown and you won't see the gold spill over. For the scabbard, I'm using a matching brown to the belt. I will also be using that same edge highlighting technique as well as a scratching technique later that will help give the appearance of worn leather over decades or centuries of use. I've decided to reattach the arm to make it easier to paint. I have also decided that I want to paint this shoulder a bright red, as I would like to try and tie it into some sword brethren that I plan to build later on in this series. It's going to be a first for me to have them this bright, as usually I have it a slightly darker red. For the skull and corona on the shoulder, I am using that gold and steel mix that I had used before on the skull on his knee. This will help tie it all together and make it look far more uniform. Chase out that very thin ring between the skull and corona, I will be using a very watered down application of the red I used on the shoulder. This will be utilizing capillary action to draw the color deep into the recesses and keep from having it bleed up over onto the metal that I have painted already. Using black paint, I am now tracing the edges of the framework on the pauldron. This will help add that level of realism to the model, especially at this scale. Now, in preparation to paint the other arm, I've decided to revisit the sword and paint some of the details that at any other time would be very difficult for me to paint, as they would be in close proximity to other pieces of the model or would be blocked by the arm. With the sword fitted, I am now starting to paint some of the framework behind the shield. Using the arm as a handle, I am able to actually apply the paint as I would like, and then later remove the arm so that then I can paint some of the positions where the brush would not be able to access due to the arm being in the way. Now I'm painting the diodes behind the shield. I'd like to try and give it an electric appearance, so I'm later going to apply a very thinned coat of the respective colors along the diodes to give an OSL-like effect along the panel of the shield. From this angle, I have unobstructed access to the far right purity seal that would be blocked by the arm when the shield is mounted, so I'm taking advantage of that time now to paint it and allow it to dry. I am also taking advantage of the paints that I currently have out to try and paint these small portions on the back of the legs. This is a first for me, as I usually paint them metallic, but I thought I'd paint them illuminated this time. Now, as I paint the power pack under the exposed plate of armor, I have decided to pick out the hoses in specific colors that I feel would be realistic for this application, after which I will go back over the exhaust ports and paint them in a black so that then I can build up a very smooth layer for later. Revisiting the shield, it's time to start tracing out the outer edge of the shield's frame. I am beginning by painting the edge that is closest to the arm, which would later become difficult to paint as the arm would block access to these points, and the chances of putting gold paint onto the arm are greatly increased. While I let the initial application of gold to the shield dry, I have decided that I'm going to start picking out the left shoulder pauldron with a cold white by Vallejo. You can see it's watered down as the opacity is not very strong, and I will build this up over time so that I can create a very smooth finish as I wish to put decal transfers on it later. For the tilt shield, I'm using a color pattern that I've used quite extensively for most of my Black Templars. It consists of a red diagonal stripe bordered by 2 gold stripes on a black background. This will be applied over several layers to build up opacity. While I have some brass paint out, I will paint the end of the belt, the muzzle end of the holster, as well as chase out some of the details on the relics on his belt. I will then start to trace out the borders of the red stripe on the tilt shield. You will see that it is not very opaque, and I will have to build up that layer over time as well. Revisiting the left arm, I am reapplying white to that shoulder. You can see how it's slowly starting to build up a very opaque white over time. While the white on the left shoulder is drying, I am now chasing out the edge highlighting for the armor panels on the right arm. You can see in some spots I go rather broad compared to other spots, as well as on the uppermost edge of the shoulder, as I'd like to try and give the appearance of light bouncing off of the surface as it would in real life. Are you sensing deja vu? Yes, this is the 3rd time we have approached the left shoulder, and hopefully the last time that I have to apply white to ensure that it is an opaque white, giving me the ideal background for a decal transfer later. I apply edge highlighting to the backpack. I start with the panels so it would be up against the armor of the model. When I move to the back of the backpack, the most exposed section, I want to try and give the appearance of significant wear and tear over decades of service. Oh no, here we go. The left arm again. Oh wait, we're applying black paint. Guess what? We're tracing out the framework just like we did on the right shoulder. I guess that means we're done applying white paint for now, and we can start advancing forward on this build. You'll see that I'm spending a lot of time being extra careful to trace out this line. I really don't want to be applying any more white paint at this point. Now that the left shoulder has been painted, it's time for us to mount the shield back to the arm and then the arm onto the model. This will give us a handle by which to hold the figure and paint the shield and finish it completely. For painting the cross and skulls, I will be using the same gold that I've been using for the framework of the shield. Now that the framework of the cross and the skulls have been painted, I'm going to apply clean water within the recesses along the skulls and cross. What this will do is it will help me use capillary action to draw the pigment of a red paint deep into those recesses and really give a feeling of depth to the model, as well as keep it cleaner and give a small bit of a reflection to it in the gold of the cross and skulls. To add some variety to the shield, I have decided to paint the end caps as well as the star point within the cross in the same silver that I used in the Aquila. This will help add some diversity to it and really make the shield pop overall. Again, applying that gold and steel mix, I will then be painting the skull in that color to match the skull on the knee, as well as the belt buckle and some of the other details on the model to really tie the whole paint scheme together. Here I'm just cleaning up some of the steel spillage with some watered down black to ensure that the shield looks clean and is ready for the next step. Oh man, I'm using capillary action again to draw some of that red in around the larger skull and trace back out some of the details along the cross. I really want to try and give that red a very strong pigmented color. For the scroll, I'm using a mix of cool white, ivory, and Iraqi sand to try and give the scroll a worn appearance. I'd like for it to appear as though it's been on the shield for quite a considerable amount of time. I will be using the same blend of paints to paint the purity seals on the front of the shield to also show some age and wear. The Neovolkite pistol, I will start by painting this section in white, as I plan to hit it with a contrast paint later to give the appearance of glowing plasma energy within the weapon. For the pistol, I'll be using a diluted red that matches the color on the shoulder. I plan to try and build this up in layers, but I also want to try and keep it darker than the shoulder so that then it looks as though it's been worn from being pulled in and out of the holster over and over again over centuries of time. For the muzzle, I am applying that steel color that I used for the Aquila, and I'm also applying it on other spots along the pistol to try and add wear and show age. For the Corona on the backpack, I am using a bronze by Vallejo, as I'd like to try and tie it in to the rest of the armor, while at the same time try and show age that it's been around for a very long time and handed down from Space Marine to Space Marine throughout the chapter. Here I'm starting to pick out some of the details on the backpack, such as the rivets, the crown on top of the skull, as well as the exhaust ports on the backpack. I will let those dry and then continue to pick out other details on the model that I have not yet touched in gold. At this point, I'm starting to clean up some of the OSL effect that I was trying to achieve on the diodes of the shield with a very diluted black. It will knock down some of that super harsh, bright color that surrounds it that makes it look more like a paint spill and less like illumination. Now I'm going around the Mini, picking out some of the details that I may not have painted, or some of the details that I feel need touching up. Now, it's important to remember that we're not yet done with this model, and I will be revisiting this later for aging and more detail work in the second video. So there are some things that I have intentionally left unpainted on this to carry on into part 2. Revisiting the pistol, I'm applying more white, and then I will be following it up with the first layer of that contrast paint that I want to use to really give that appearance of energy flowing through the weapon. Here I've decided to go back to the backpack and apply more edge highlighting, as I'd like to try and get as much of that done in this video in preparation for the next video to share with you later. Now for one of my favorite effects on a Space Marine, I'm going over the exhaust panels with a bright orange that's been diluted with water to give the appearance that it's actually got exhaust coming out of those ports. And there you have it, everybody. This is my Black Templar Space Marine Lieutenant ready for the next step. That's going to consist of aging, blending, and shading, as well as building the base for this model. I am going to show you next time how to do a cork base to give a simulated stone platform, and I will top it all off in a snow texture to tie it in with the rest of my Black Templar. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have a good one.